Alright, hello and welcome to Plugin Along, a stream dedicated to LOTRO plugins. Last time on Plugin Along, we looked at what it would take to make the deed tracker plugin resizable. Turns out vertical resizability, very doable, but horizontal was more work than we could get done easily on stream. Today we're going to look at a few outstanding bugs that affect the deed tracker user interface, the UI, on our way to getting it ready for a 3.03 release. This is just a little incremental release after the last incremental release after the big one. And it's got a bug fix or two for the import process, but also a few other nice to haves. Sorry, my shirt is sitting weird. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at where we're at. Also, my camera seems to be a little off. There we go. Okay, so where are we? Well, we're in Glen Helig because I like it here, and we are working with the deed tracker plugin. If you're not familiar with the deed tracker plugin, it is meant to work alongside the in-game deed log and provide a hierarchical view of which deeds you have and haven't done. So for instance, if I've completed Explorer of Breland, I have necessarily completed all of the rest of these Explorer deeds. I'm going to go ahead and check a few of these boxes here. That'll make life a little bit easier. Okay. So, similarly, Breland Adventurer, in order to complete Breland Final, you must have completed Advanced and Basic. So, this is the deed tracker, and we're going to be looking at the code using Visual Studio Code, which is a free tool that you can download. And we're using the LOTRO API extension by community member Lunar Water, which adds IntelliSense for LOTRO aspects, all of the things that we can do interacting with the game. And we also have our source control. We're using Fork, which can be found at fork.dev. It's also a free tool and is wrapping around a Git repository, which I think I'm storing out on GitHub, but that matters less. As long as you have source controls, you're already doing better. Okay, and we can see we have a couple of outstanding changes in our working directory. One of them is just turning debug options on, so I'm not going to worry about that. The other one is some changes to the to-do file. Some notes I was making to myself this last week, which we'll come back to maybe, and then reorganizing and removing some things. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark this as to-do file updates and commit that. And maybe one of these days I'll make use of the GitHub ability to... oh, hey. There is a cat on the couch, isn't there? Excellent. Well spotted, Dame Hypatia. Hey, Casper. Casper, the internet waits. No, Casper's not ready to get up. Oh, well. I think that might take him below an eye line. That's okay. At some point, he might come and sit closer to us when he wants to parallel sit with us. Yeah, when the sun goes down, maybe he'll be like, okay, now it's time to sit upright. And Elia says, the cat is unfazed by the attention. It's true. I'm not entirely sure they know their names. Those are the names the adoption, the shelter gave to us, so it's there's a non-zero chance they're not actually their names. But that's okay. My patient says, cleaning oneself is to be taken seriously. Yeah, it's a specialty for cats. And you know what? I'd rather they were obsessively cleaning themselves than the alternative. Okay, so we have a clean working directory. What do we have that's unpushed? Allow the main window to be resized vertically. Well, that was fine. And the to-do file. We're going to go ahead and push those out so we can keep track of what changes are only local. Great. And we have our to-do file. Like I was saying, we could do maybe a professional way of issue tracking by using something like GitHub and organizing things into releases and all sorts of fun things. If you don't have access to that, or you can't be bothered, at least have a text file somewhere with all of those notes, because in your head is a very bad place to store bug reports. Okay, so there are a couple, speaking of bug reports here, and I wonder if I can go ahead and turn on word wrap. I wonder if that's just for this file. I think it is just for that file. Awesome, perfect. Just what I wanted. Okay, so we have possibly related things, bugs in the UI. So we're talking about the hide completed deeds, and we can see a cluster of these, and one other deed, which is actually an issue with deed detection. I thought we might start with the deed detection first, even though it's the last one, because it's the one that isn't just a visual issue. You will actually get a deed marked incorrectly, at least at the time that I recorded this bug. You'll get a deed marked incorrectly done just when you completed a quest, if this bug is still in existence. So we're going to look at this one first. It's the real one. And what's the problem here? Well, the problem is in LOTRO, there are a lot of deeds with the same name prior to, let's say, Gondor. So if you go for Warg Slayer, Warg with a hyphen Slayer, then you will notice that there are Warg Slayers now in Swampfleet and Carlon, nice, but Warg Slayer for Lonelands, and Warg Slayer for North Downs, and Warg Slayer for Misty Mountains, and for Angmar, and for Orechian, and for Dunland, not to mention in Moria and Southern Mirkwood, and it looks like sometime after that, let's see, Great River? How's the Great River?
It's great.
Slayer, nope, still just unannotated Slayers. So we can see when we get to Eastern Rohan, the Slayer deeds start becoming specific. We start getting Ancient Evil Slayer of the Eastamnet, and then of the Westamnet, and of Western Gondor, Eastern Gondor. So they start appending the region into this. And I don't know what the reasoning for the switch was, but I do know at the time that they did it, there were like 10 deeds that were like Warg Slayer, same name, and the only distinction was which tab they're in, which is not great. And there's also at least one quest called Warg Slayer that you can get in the North Downs, and that's what's concerning us today. Is if you complete the quest, Warg Slayer, in the North Downs, then we can accidentally mark that as an Angmar deed instead of the North Downs quest. So that's what we're going to look at today. How do we do that? Well, one of the nice things about the deed tracker is we have the ability to lie to ourselves. And Bart says, hello again. You will not have any spoilery content regarding Bingo Boffin here. We're all done with that. So we have the ability to lie and fake out our state as far as the deed tracker is concerned with our debug capabilities. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So one of the things we can do is fake out our location. So if I say, hey, we're in the North Downs, deed tracker thinks I moved to the North Downs. Fantastic. Why is it saying offline? Well, plugins don't know where you are. There's no capability to know where you are, but they can pay attention to the /loc command for precise coordinates, and they can pay attention to what regional chat channels you join. So if I were to move to the North Downs, I would also change regional chat channels from whatever one I happen to be in now to the North Downs regional chat channel. And we can base which regional chat channel you are and kind of determine what deed region you're in. There's a large lookup table in deed tracker for that very purpose. After the Great River, once you hit the East Rohan, stops being as important because the deed names stop being as collision prone, especially with the Slayer deed names. but it could still happen, and so it's nice to know where you are. So we are in the North Downs as far as deed tracker knows. Now, how else do we set this up? We want the North Downs Warg Slayer deed to be done. Okay, that's easy enough. Let's go ahead back to Eriador, expand to North Downs, come on in, and Warg Slayer. I'll just manually click it. And then complete the Warg Slayer quest. All right. Can do. Warg Slayer. Complete. And we can see we auto-detected that, and the ambiguation system looks to see, okay, you can't do the one in the North Downs, and I think you're in the North Downs, and the only adjacent Warg Slayer to the North Downs is in Angmar. So you must have just completed the Warg Slayer in Angmar. What we're not looking at is conflicting quests that could be in the same region. So that's not great. We're going to come back in, Warg Slayer, and we're going to expand Angmar. We're going to go ahead and clear that list and undo that completion. It's replicatable. If I uncheck that and I complete the Warg Slayer quest again, hey, you completed Warg Slayer in Angmar. It does give you the Lord of or Lady of Fangs title, which is pretty cool. You know what? Let's do it. I don't need to be the hero of Yorlsmead. So we're going to change the title in your character screen. Titles, Fangs, Lady of Fangs. Got it. Sweet. What's the Northbound one give you? Wargfoe. Boring. Okay. So we are checking to see, and so the way the algorithm goes is it says for the disambiguation, and actually maybe we should do a disambiguation. Let's go ahead and demonstrate that using Breeland and Warg Slayer. Okay, so this is the disambiguation window in its glory, which is to say you're in Breeland and you completed something called Warg Slayer. I don't know which of these deeds it is, and we can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them. But there's these two adjacent ones. Maybe you were in the Lone Lands and were attacking a warg and you stepped into Breeland and then you killed the warg, getting credit for it for your Lone Lands deed, which is a thing that happens. Can happen. It's unlikely, but it can happen. When you drag a mob across a border, it still counts for whatever deed it originally counted for. It doesn't magically count for the new region it's now in. Or did we just not know where you are, in which case it's any of these other Warg Slayers? And if you've already completed one of these, it does not show up. So if I go ahead and close that window and repop it open, if I come in here to Ravanian and go ahead and get rid of Warg Slayer here, and then complete, we can see the Moria Warg Slayer no longer shows up, right? If I come into Southern Mirkwood and also get rid of that one, complete that, okay, it's no longer. So we're only showing deeds that haven't been completed yet. Awesome. That's great. Little Redhead thinks this UI is unnecessarily complicated, and she's not necessarily wrong. It's just, I don't have enough faith in the deed tracker's ability to know where it is to kind of make this decision. And maybe I should. If the deed tracker thinks you're in a region, I should probably be okay with it. But like I said, it is possible to take a mob, like a goblin, from the eastern border of Breeland, walk across into the Lone Lands, defeat it, and complete the Breeland deed. So knowing where you are, it's not the complete picture. It's a 99% chance of being correct, but I'm hesitant to auto-complete any deed if I don't know for sure that that's the deed. So if you complete a deed and there's only one matching deed and there's nothing in an adjacent one, we're good. We just auto-complete that. But if there is that possibility of we could have just walked across the border, then we pop up this stupid window. And it is annoyingly complex. I'm going to go ahead and uncomplete those though, because I like how bad this window can get statistically. Okay, so what we want to do is when we are in the North Downs, what is next to us that has Workslayer? It is actually only Angmar that is directly next to us. Little Redhead thinks fonts are easier than they are. Little Redhead thinks the window could have the 99% option big and the other potential options teeny below. Is what Little Redhead actually said. And Nella says, D-Tracker is so useful. I just downloaded it recently. Now we only need a similar plugin for quests. You are not the first person, Anello, to think about such things. In my lack of free time, I have made no motions toward that. But a quest tracker, and Saren is lurking. Hello! A quest tracker is something I have an interest in if it would be more like a quest guider, as in, if you do not have any other opinions, here's where you should go, what quests you should pick up, and what quests you should do, or do them in order. Like, just kind of I just want to turn my brain off and kind of speed level through this area. What would that look like? And I think that could be really interesting, because sometimes I want to do that. But just listing the quests in an area without that kind of a structure, just like the hierarchical structure that the D-Tracker provides, I haven't seen as much benefit for that. And so structuring those quests is tricky. Like, I don't know if tricky is the right word. It requires you to actually kind of go through and kind of feel it out. And okay, you want to do these and also this and also that, but not that one. And as you go through the game, they definitely get a little bit more structured. Like, you'll have a quest hub, and you'll be able to reasonably complete all of those quests and kind of move on to the next quest hub. But especially early on, there's some interwovenness to the quests where it's like, that's not as straightforward, and I don't know what that would look like. And so I've been letting myself let it sit in the back of my head and percolate. But don't let that stop anyone else. If anyone else wants to make a quest tracker in the style of Deed Tracker, by all means. But if no one does that, maybe eventually I'll be able to get to it. Got to finish building a cat house in the backyard for the cats to go out into, because the weather is getting really nice. Okay, so we can replicate the bug. If we are in North Downs and we complete Workslayer, then it is the possible real regions that hang on, my region didn't change. Okay, so if you're in the North Downs, then we know the North Downs Workslayer matches, and there's a border shared with Angmar, where it could potentially be that, and then all the rest of them. And so if North Downs isn't an option, there is only one unambiguous answer, and that's Angmar. And so here's where we can replicate the problem. And let's go on into the code and figure out what are we doing wrong. And the answer is almost certainly in the conflicting deeds information. So conflicting quests, I'm sorry. So we have conflicting quests, and we can see that we're not checking that conflicting quests against the uncompleted deeds, against the completed deeds, only the uncompleted deeds. And it also says, they think a list has it. She says it's great for completionists like them who don't want to miss any quests. But you see my point. Also, figure out the hierarchy of all quests and listing every obscure seasonal quest seems like a Herculean task. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be 100%. When we start out, the D-Tracker wasn't and still isn't 100%. I'm missing some seasonal stuff. Like, there's like 2 thespians and, 2 here and 2 there. And, there's this deed that was completable 12 years ago, and some people have that, but you can't complete it anymore. And it's hard to tell which ones are someone could have that in their deed log completed, but you can't do it anymore, versus you never could do it. It was never live. It's only in beta. All these little edge cases. So D-Tracker, I'd say, is like 99% correct. But for, 6 months there, I had the Critter Slayer of Gundabad in there, and people were like, how do you do this deed? I can't do it. It seems like it was only a beta thing. Never actually went live. Oops. So I try not to have deeds in there that can't be done, but there are some deeds that aren't in there that can be done or could have been done. And I think it would be the same for the quests. Like there's, more than 10,000 quests in LOTRO. You would just have to be comfortable with good. And Ella says, as long as you have Boar Slayer, you're fine. Great question. Boar. What is that one? Oh, sorry. Class Race Epic, of course. Boar. Boar Slayer. I do. For too long, Boarkind has plagued the land. In your efforts, you have shown a desire to drive them from Middle-earth. Okay. So, if we say Workslayer, then this looks and sees that that quest is available. So let's go ahead and take a look at this disambiguation window and see how is it working. And the answer might be very badly. Alright, so when we come into the disambiguate window, we go through create window. Where does draw main label get... Okay, so there's a set deeds function. Unfortunately, these are not organized very well, but I think set deeds is probably what's being called. Yes. So when it's time, set deeds is going to be setting for a deed named X a table of deeds that we can iterate through. And so I think this is purely a UI thing. Awesome. What we need to do is find where is calling the set deeds and make sure that a completed deed with a conflicting quest is still counted. Or rather, that conflicted quest is still in there. And... or actually... add conflicting quests to present. So what I think is happening is the set deeds isn't even getting called. So what's going on here? We want to know that found deed count. So debug, where are we? If deed mark complete, and we're just going to do a string.format. So we can toss in a string, another string, and oh, how do you do numbers with string.format? I don't know. Lua, string.format. It's probably like %d or something. That's not lua.org. %d looks great. Okay. And then we'll just go ahead and add in character, deed name, and region. Found a deed count. Great. Okay, so for that to apply, we do need to remember to reload the plugin. And we're going to go ahead and come in and complete the North Downs layer. Oh, all right. We're going to wait for LOTRO to respond before I keep clicking on it. Awesome, thanks LOTRO. Alright, we're in the North Downs, obviously. We completed the North Downs Works layer. So, if we go ahead and complete this, bad argument. Awesome. Hello, Casper. Make sure the wide world can see you. Hey. No? Is grooming more important? Okay. You do that. Okay, so for some reason it did not like the deed name. Or possibly the character name. Why? Oh, well, for one thing, I did not actually use parentheses there. That will do it, I would imagine. Okay, No squigglies. Pay attention to the squigglies in the IntelliSense. They're your friend. Okay, so the North Downs works layer is done. We're in the North Downs and works layer. Okay, so what we can see is deed tracker. Okay, skipping this, already completed. If deed, mark complete, after the works layer 6. Found the following matches, but only one is in an adjacent region. So what we need is, in this case, if regional K count is 1, whatever populated this needs to check those quests. Those conflicting quests. I'm just realizing I don't remember what region OK is. Oh, wow. Okay, so our result is actually a table of the ID of the deed and a region OK entry, which is either true or not true, based first on, is it a region deed, that is it Eriador through Mordor, and then also, you look like you're waiting for something, Casper, and also, are the regions adjacent, which is its own check. Okay, cool. So let's come on back to set deeds. Oh, not set deeds. Sorry. Let's come on back here. So region count OK is coming from get region count OK. Okay. Yep. Let's get in here. And this one we need to. I'm not convinced that's the right one. If the region count OK, it would be nice to know about the conflicting quest. Where does the conflicting quest come in? Conflict. Alright, add conflicting quest if present. Does deed have conflicting quest? The problem is the deed we're interested in is skipping this already completed. So we need a way to include that it was already completed in a way that we can following matching. Yeah, okay. This may be a lot trickier than I thought, which would explain why I've never fixed the problem. Let's get a sense of what that found deeds looks like by calling dump on that. Now we do want to come in here and make sure Angmar's works layer is no longer selected, and we're going to go ahead and reload. Great. So we're in the North Downs, we're completing Workslayer, and we get a sense of, okay, this is a table with 6 entries with IDs and regional k equals false. So or true. And what we need is an extra parameter that says whether or not the deed is already done, because we can't check for a conflicting quest if the deed's not in this list. Okay, so get deed indices. Where all is this being used? The good news, just here. So we can change it with impunity because we are looking at the caller and the function at the same time. So if we change what's being returned, we can change how we look at it. This can be really annoying if 17 different places are calling a function. You have to be a lot more careful with how you change that function. I'm going to grab a little bit of water here, though. Okay. Okay, given a deed name, return IJK values for possible uncompleted deed matches. So funny because IJK is not in there anymore. Return the IDs for matching deeds, and for each ID include if the region is the same or adjacent, and if the deed is completed. That's what we want. Alright, we're going to go ahead and tidy that up a little bit. Okay. So this is what we would actually like. So we have a results. Remember, it says, sorry, just jump back in. The green text you just did, is that code or notes to self? What a great question. In Lua, like with most programming languages, there are things called comments, which are just something meant to be read by the developer, the programmer. It is possible that in some languages the comments are accessible to the parser, but in general you can assume that those are thrown away by the computer while it's trying to think about how to make this run under the covers. It just says, oh, a comment, don't care. A comment, don't care. A comment, don't care. And then it gets to the function declarations like, aha, this is something for me, the computer. So this green text is a block of comments. And most every language that people use nowadays usually has one or more ways to write comments. For instance, in languages like C# or C++, you would use a / to indicate the start of a single line comment. This is a single line comment. A lot of languages will also give you the ability to do block comments. For instance, in C or C++, you would start with a // and then everything in between. This is all comments. It is not proper Lua syntax, and boy does it not like this. But we can see that Lua should use -- bracket bracket space close bracket for multi-line annotations. That sounds great. Do that. All right. What did you just say? All right, so dash dash bracket. So in Lua, it would like us to remember, and just like with that, it'll say Lua should use dash dash for a single line comment. So in Lua, this is the single line comment, and this is a multi-line comment, which is still just the same thing, but everything between those is you don't have to have every line start with a dash dash. Now, your tastes and your mileage may vary. You might find that it's easier to notice a comment if the line starts with a dash dash. Where this gets a little bit tough, if you have a 50-line comment block, then maybe it makes more sense to do it like this. And with syntax highlighting in this nice modern era of the 20th and 21st centuries, we can see it's all green, and so that tells us it's a comment. But in ye olden days, when you didn't have the color to kind of annotate to let you know the context of things, it could be very useful to have some sort of an indicator, which is why if you ever look at old C code, you'll probably see a multi-line comment block still have something like these stars at the beginning of it to show you this is still a comment block. Right, and if we get, didn't have that squiggly line, you would see, okay, we still have a visual indication, as opposed to, like this, is this a comment? And without syntax highlighting, without the color coding of the code, we wouldn't have a good answer to that question without kind of looking up, looking down, and whatnot. Modern code, it's less of an issue. And in modern code editors, you can even do things like collapse blocks. So if you do write a multi-block code comment that's really long, you can just be like, okay, I don't need that right now. Let's squish it down. And when you do need it, okay, let's bring it back up. I don't need that. Okay. So great question. Short answer, most programming languages have the way to write comments, notes to yourself or other developers. In this syntax highlighting, those show up as green, and we do a dash dash to make that happen. And we can see scattered throughout this function are notes to ourselves on what the logic is trying to do. And not to belabor points or anything, but something people who are new to programming can get in the mistake of doing is trying to highlight what the code is doing and not why. So like set result count to 0. That's a true comment in the fact that this is what the next line is going to do. In fact, a more thorough comment would be declare the variable result count local to the function and set its value to 0. Like, this is technically a comment, and it is describing the next line in some ways. But what it's really doing is just restating the mechanics of the next line. It doesn't tell us anything at all about what's the purpose of result count. Why are we setting it to 0? What does 0 even mean in this context? It's doing nothing useful. All it's doing is, if you are brand new to the language, you now have an English description of what the code is doing. Right? Like, okay, I guess it's local to the function, cool, and it's called result count, so that's the variable name, and we're setting its value to 0, so we're using the equal sign to do that. But that's day one stuff of learning a programming language, and after that, the comment is visual clutter. It's not helping us out. It'd be much more useful to say result count is a local count of how many matching deeds we have found, right? We start with 0 and increment from there. That kind of thing. So that at least tells us how we're using it. However, because we named it result count, it is probably going to be a count of results, right? So this kind of a annotation is much more useful if you name your variables, I don't want to say badly, but if you don't name your variables in a clear way. If you have a local variable called x, yeah, you might need some help remembering what that does. But if you have a variable called result count, let's hope it's counting results, because if it's not, you have messed up somewhere. So comments are great, but knowing what to put in your comments can be really helpful in addition to how to make a comment as well. And when you're just learning the language, it can be really tempting to document the mechanics of the language because that is new to you. And, how do I declare a dictionary with indexes of a string that are linking to a list? And annotating these things in code can feel very tempting. But as you get more familiar with the language and in coding in general, you definitely want to make sure you're focusing on the why and not the what. Let's see. Okay, so great question. Thanks for derailing me a little bit there. So we have an is completed or checkbox exists and is checked. And this is because at one point, probably still, there's a sense of the user interface has a little checkbox that shows whether or not the deed is completed or not. And it entirely was possible at one point for that to get checked and for that not to register, for that not to be correlated with a save entry in the file. I don't know if that's still true. But what we really want is a consolidated entry here, maybe called is completed. So local is deed completed equals these two things. Is completed or the checkbox exists and is checked. That's fine. And we could even hopefully skip some issues here and rename this to be deed complete equals get deed complete. And then this code would be is deed completed. The real question is, did we break anything else there? And for that, let's duck into our source code a second and see what did we just change. Okay, there was something called is completed. Well, is that being used anywhere else here? Let's do a quick look. It is not. Not until a different function. Okay. We added a local variable, no problems there. And then we were also using the checkbox exists and is checked. Let's see if that's being used anywhere. And we're on line 395. Cool. It's only being used here. Great. So we now have a single variable, is the deed completed. And what we were doing is just skipping it. But what we would like to do is the results here, we want the results to include a completed flag. So completed equals true. Awesome. Now, oh, I'm sorry, it would be false in this case. Completed equals false. Let's take a look at that in a game here. So we're going to go ahead and reload the plugin. And we're back in the North Downs and we complete Workslayer. Awesome. So what we can see is all of these have that completed equals false. Perfect. If they were completed, they wouldn't be showing up. But we've hard-coded that completed equals false. What we'd like to do is reference the is deed completed. Let's stick that in there. I'm gonna clear that, clear the... Cool. Reload. Okay, and we can see once again, they all say false. But they don't say it because we hard-coded false, they say it because that's the status of is deed complete. Otherwise we wouldn't have gotten into this branch. But what does that mean? That means maybe we can just kill the is deed complete branch. For a minute, we're going to get wrong answers here. Hypatia is taunting me in German. Sorry, wrong chat. Wrong chat indeed. No, it's true. Ponies and horses do have weight limits, just like adventurers in D&D campaigns, and one ignores those at one's own peril. You know, what's funny is, now that I know the English translation of that, I'm seeing how it correlates to the Dutch. I'm going to get distracted with that. The bidda is probably the weirdest thing, right? Because it'd be ik vraag om een gewichtslimiet. But begrenzing, I kind of see where that would be a different word in Dutch. Zo'n pony is geen olifant. Thank you for the amusement, Dame Hypatia. I have no skill in German, but as I get incrementally more ability to read and understand Dutch, I get tiny fragments of German along for free, and I think that's pretty neat. Okay, so we've gone ahead and said, don't worry about it if the deed is complete. So we're going to get the wrong answer. So North Downs and complete works there. So notice that now it's showing up in the completion window, which is a problem. We need to pay attention to that is completed flag. In fact, let's go ahead and say is completed. And come back into the conflicting quests, disambiguate window. And let's go ahead and exclude it here, where we're iterating through each of them. So if deed wait a second. Where are we getting called from? Right, deed indices is getting called from somewhere else. Okay, so that's where we get the found deeds. Okay. Do we have a completed equals true in here? Completed equals true, great. So found deeds, when we're processing this, okay, so we're checking that found deeds deed index. So what we really need to say is if found deeds deed index, if found deeds deed index dot or is completed and found deeds is that, then count plus 1. Okay. But really, this is where we can go ahead and check. Or found deeds deed index we need the ID And what are we going to do that? In conflicting quests, we have, really, we just have data files dot conflicting quests ID so if found deeds, if not that, and there's a conflicting quest. Or there's a regional K count. So include it if that is completed is going to mess me up because not completed is the thing. So if not is completed, or if it is completed, I might really want to call that is not completed because that's what we care about. But then I'll be doing not is not completed, and I want to resist the urge to do that. Okay, so regional K count is written. Nuta says, piggybacking on Nello, deed tracker helped me get Kindred and Dol Amroth. Oh, awesome. Yeah, I find it really useful as kind of a guide. Like the first thing I do on my completionist characters, it just try to hop through each of the quest hubs and do everything they have there. And as that happens, we're completing our deeds as we go along. Like the quest of Lamedon, the quest of Belfast, the quest of Blackroot Vale, all of those things. And yeah, they give reputation with Dol Amroth. And then Slayers, usually if you're not too aggressive about hopping up on a mountain, riding off as soon as you're done with a quest, maybe you run over landscape, you avoid hunter travel, and you kind of slay everything you can along the way, then you're going to make good progress on your Slayer deeds as well. And a lot of times, your Explorer deeds just happen as you're out doing your all the quests of a region. Not the treasure caches necessarily, which you might find some of them, but definitely the camps of the enemies. Well, if you've done every quest in the region, you probably hit every camp of the enemy. So a lot of your Explorer deeds are probably done by then. And then it's just time for cleanup. Go back into the last couple of Slayer deeds, go back into the last couple of Explorer deeds, and anything else. But if you're not doing a completionist character, then you don't have all of the quests to guide you, but you do want those deeds because of the LOTRO points, because of the virtue experience. Totally get it. Then yeah, it can be very handy to just be like, okay, what do I need? Quest of Lamedon. I just need to complete 30 quests and done, right? Quest of Belfast. Or you just say, I'm going to ignore these 10k of virtue, just focus on the exploration. Those are really fast. And the Slayer deeds, I'm 20 levels ahead, whatever, blah, 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 done. Maybe pop an accelerator. But because the quests of whatever, doing the quests of a region often give a lot of virtue experience, it's hard for me to say no to them. Aaronbart says, do all deeds drop LOTRO points? Indeed, they do not, which is why the deed tracker shows which quests give LOTRO points and virtue experience. Those are shown to the left of each deed, and we can see Beacons of West Gondor gives 5 LOTRO points and 2,000 virtue experience, whereas the quest of West Gondor gives you nothing. It's very unfair. And the Dol Amroth City Watch deeds, did I say quest? Deeds don't give you LOTRO points or virtue experience. Earlier on, though, if you're looking at Deeds of the Shire, then in general, for instance, all of the basic Slayer deeds give you 5 LOTRO points, and all the advanced ones give you 10 LOTRO points and 2,000 virtue experience. But then the wrapper quest, Slayer of the Shire, just gives virtue experience and not LOTRO points. Explorer of the Shire, same thing. So it's a little bit of each. And Yondershire, gives no LOTRO points except for the quick post of Yondershire. It gives 5. Yondershire only gives virtue experience and some other in-game stuff. And so that was another thing where I was like, I really want to be able to see this at hand. And so you'll also see summaries if you're looking for that information. So you can see in total 155 LOTRO points available in the Shire, plus 50,000 virtue experience. Eredlun's a little bit of a mix because you've got Sarnar, which is like a level 45 to 50 area. And so, yes, technically in Erdlun you can get 185 Lotro points and 38,000 virtue experience, but you're going to have to get into Sarnar to get it all, right? You're going to have to do Betrayer's Bane, Master Beast, Troll Kicker, and Avenger. And holy moly, are the spawn times on the rares for Avenger of Sarnar very sad. It just says it. Aircraft says City Watch deeds give you two things: diddly and squat. Yeah, that's fair. It's satisfaction of a job well done, Agartha. Ninja says, deed tracker helped you find the following deeds in Moria. Absolutely. And I've been working on some of these auto-generated tooltips. So, let's see. Where is that one? Is that one of the optional ones? Yeah, the Pits of Moria. And so I don't have locations because it's such a wide net of possibilities, but I do have some nice descriptions going on here. So you know it's Great Delving, Silvertime loads, Durin's Way, Redhorn loads, Nudmalek, and Khazad-dûm, the Bridge of Kama. Yeah, the wiki will have specific locations that work for that, but just knowing that it's there, right? Like, you've got to know these things are there, and that's one of the reasons I really love having the hidden deeds. Not quite so hidden. Although I would kind of like to have them colored differently. Like, you're not going to see this in the game either until you start it or at all until you finish it. But color coding things is tricky because I do want to be cognizant that there's a lot of people out there with some level of pigment deficiency, especially red-green, and so... like the fact that I'm highlighting this as green, I kind of justify in that it's the only green on there and there's no red. And that's true as long as someone doesn't have a user interface that changes those colors of buttons and whatnot. But yeah, using only color to indicate that kind of thing is tough, which is why these not actively available ones also include why they're not actively available, like it's obsolete. Okay, great questions. Okay, so we have a regional K count. That function has been updated, possibly fixed. And then if the regional K count equals 1, well, we're not going to be in there anymore. Deeds. Okay. Set deeds, deed name, found deeds. Okay, so now we're into the disambiguate set deeds. We have found deeds. Get regional K count. Why are we not just passing that? We have that. What is wrong with me? Yeah. What on earth? Regional K count. Hey, look, this thing that you just calculated, give it to them. Okay. Nietzsche's, is it okay to talk / chat about plugins and your thoughts / opinions of them? Yeah, sure. I'm generally in favor of them, but as someone who writes plugins and also streams about the process of writing plugins, that may have been a safe assumption. I think there's a very interesting video that Folding Ideas, or Dan Olson over on YouTube, put out recently. And it got into how in the World of Warcraft add-on ecosystem, add-ons can do so much that they become sort of an integral part of especially endgame raiding advanced strategy, to the point where you almost can't be a competitive player without them, because there's a general assumption that you will be using them and other people's plugins won't work as well if yours isn't feeding them information and vice versa. And also, because of that feedback loop, the people who are designing new encounters are kind of assuming that you will have those plugins available to you and are reacting to that. And so there's this whole aspect there where it kind of becomes a requirement of endgame play instead of just a nice enhancement. And that's an interesting problem. one that for the most part I feel like LOTRO doesn't have, because the LOTRO API has such a smaller availability for plugins that it's more difficult for them to do all the things, right? Like, plugins can't tell where you are unless you're actively hitting a button to say, here I am, here I am, here I am. Plugins can't browse the auction house and buy things on your behalf. I don't know if they still can do that now, but in early World of Warcraft days, they absolutely could. Anyway, so I'm generally in favor of them, though I am cognizant for some games that add-ons can cause systemic problems with the nature of cooperative play. Anyway, Nutus also says, sorry if this is asked, but what are your thoughts about the ChatGPT with WoW and your thoughts in regards to WoW? And your thoughts in regards to the LOTRO. I do not know what you are referring to about ChatGPT with WoW. I assume World of Warcraft. My general thought on ChatGPT is that it's an interesting toy, but it's... Newton says they built a plugin that reads the quest using ChatGPT. Oh, I see. Fascinating. Reads the quest aloud, or reads the quest and automates things based on what it reads? Apparently, I need to keep up on my news. Reads aloud in a voice. Interesting. That seems like a really interesting accessibility feature. It's also something that is not inherently available through LOTRO, the LOTRO API. Plugins in LOTRO can't see the text of quests, or can't. They can tell what quest you have accepted, but if multiple quests have the same name, and they do, then it can't tell which of those is. The user would have to disambiguate, or again, if there's a regional kind of thing. It just says it looks like it reads a MySQL database with the text saves. Yeah, I think I like the idea of plugins that allow for an accessibility. Like, if you have poor eyesight or aren't great at reading but are really good at listening in whatever language the game is written in, I think a plugin that just says, hey, we're going to take that text and just text-to-speech it, that sounds like it has a lot of potential for opening the game up a little bit. And not a lot of potential for abuse, is what it sounds like. So I think that sounds like a really neat thing on the face of it. Now, I'm not I should preface this, if you don't already know, I am not a developer at SSG, I'm not an employee of SSG, I'm just a fan who likes Lord of the Rings Online and plugins and putting them together and talking to people about them. So I speak with no authority on behalf of the company and really no real knowledge either. But I will say it might be possible to have a database of quest text and to know approximately which quest the user has just accepted. And so it could be possible to have pre-done text-to-speeches such that when you accept a quest, it fires off the relevant read this dialogue so that you could hear what was happening in the quest dialogue. It'd be really tricky for incremental progresses, like you've collected warg pelts 1 out of 10. Like, would you want to hear that? Is that good to hear? And when you go back to a quest person and you interact with them, there's no real indication to a plugin that you're doing that, other than did the quest fully complete or did you get a new quest? So incremental progresses would be a little bit harder. But the initial quest giving, that you could know when it was happening, more or less. And if you look at the Prime plugin, they have I think it's Prime, they have a third-party desktop application, and they combine that with chat logging, where everything that goes into your chat log gets dumped into a file immediately, which bypasses a plugin's 6-second delay between trying to save something and actually hitting the the disc, maybe 10 seconds. Like it's a long delay. And so the Prime desktop program, I think it's Prime, correct me if I'm wrong, looks at that chat logging, and when it sees relevant things, it plays sounds. And so you can have like RAID relevant sounds playing with that setup. And so you could also do that. You just log the standard channel, the quest channel, and something could look at that and say, oh, you just took Warg Slayer and you're in the North Downs, so here you go. And so it is possible to combine a plugin with a desktop application that adds functionality that you just can't do in the game. Like a plugin can't play a sound, but a program running separately can play a sound, and the program can look at your chat logging, and you can have LOTRO chat log. And so you can close that loop. But it sounds like a lot of work for a bit of an incomplete result, because as plugins in LOTRO don't have access to your quest status, it can be really difficult to know when would you play the next bit. For instance, probably. Sorry, I'm trying to find a quest that like is a multi-part quest here. Yeah. So Thorn in the Hand. Thorn in the Hand is... Oh, I got a cat behind me. I didn't even notice. So Thorn in the Hand is related to the Rise of Isengard quest hub instance cluster, and it has you go through each one of these steps. So the initial bestowal dialogue, you could know to play as a plugin could, well, a third-party program could be looking at that quest, that chat logging, and say, oh, you just got a thorn in the hand, and it could read, I have no love for the Forkoi whom you give aid, and it could read that part. But when you go back to them, knowing that you have finished objective 1, and what's the text for the next section, what's the quest text for the next section, and when do we read it, that's hard. Like Arthur points out, sometimes NPCs will visualize things as part of quest progression, but it's not consistent. Sometimes there isn't even an NPC around. Yeah, those auto-bestowed quests you get in the wilderness and then they go away. Like, you were never going to talk to an NPC. I think it would be really neat if... Well, if I could wave a magic wand and just give them the resources to do it, have a little checkbox that says, you know, have someone reading this in my ear, just like they sometimes do in the short snippets, just voice recordings for everything, which I don't think SSG has the budget for or would think that was a useful use of budget if they did. But I think that would be interesting. Just do it all. Book on tape it all. But also, if there was just a way to kind of integrate to a text-to-voice kind of thing, where just... Yeah, do your best, LOTRO. Just automate it, and I'll tell you when I want you to turn it off. Just like having options that says, yeah, go ahead and try to read it. see what happens. See what your text to speech thinks of Nan Kuranir or Thank. Yeah, I think as an accessibility concern, it would be really interesting. As a development effort, I think it sounds nightmarish to try to get people to actually record the dialogue, and it sounds difficult to even pull in a text-to-speech library and make it work reasonably well across the board and not just turn into some sort of support nightmare. My computer's talking to me and it hasn't stopped for the last 20 minutes. I don't know what I did. Well, you checked the wrong box in options. You just make it in the Gandalf voice. Yeah, maybe. So, yeah, you definitely have some long quest text, and you definitely have the question of what happens if someone accidentally turns it on, right? And so, accessibility features can kind of work both ways. Like, it can be really helpful for people with auditory issues, but if you accidentally turn it on and that kind of thing is not good for you, then oops. Ninja says, one of the limitations I did see was someone accepting a quest and ran off, but it was still reading. Yeah, you'd kind of have to think of it more like a narrator and less like the NPC is telling this to me. If you want your immersion to not be broken, or you just don't run off. Either way, thanks for letting me know. I feel like maybe I vaguely heard about that somewhere, maybe on the forums, but it didn't stick in my head, obviously. Okay, so we have set deeds, and we have a table of found deeds. And so, as we iterate through this, what we want to do is pay attention to that completed status. So deeds and found deeds equals this, deed ID equals that. So what we really want to do is if not found deed is completed, then do all that stuff, end. And the real question is, great. We can pass add conflict, the found deeds, add conflicting quest. Great. Let's see how that goes. We're gonna reload our plugin, and we're gonna get set back up, searching for Warg Slayer, and great. So we're in the North Downs. Our North Downs Warg Slayer is complete, and we're gonna go ahead and complete a Warg Slayer. You completed something that could be a deed or a quest. Warg Slayer. Unfortunately, we can't tell which of the following it was. Click Select Deed or Select Quest next to the right one. Your current location, North Downs. The following are in an adjacent region, Angmar. The following match, but are not an adjacent region, and there's also a quest with the same name. Did you complete that instead? Harrydor, the North Downs quest, Warg Slayer. Awesome. That's the one. Bam. I think it's a repeatable quest, though. So, completing it once doesn't mean we can't see that same message again. Okay, so what do we have? We have added in the concept of let's report all of the deeds, and whether they're completed or not, and still just only display the ones that are not completed. And by having the completed ones in the list, we can still use their specific conflicting quest lookup to find conflicting quests. And that's what we have here. We're in the North Downs, and because there's a quest in the North Downs, we get one region, and then Angmar, that's 2 regions. Now we have a conflict, and now we need to get this disambiguation window up. That makes me feel pretty good. Let's make sure we didn't break anything else in progress, though. So, what do we see? If we go ahead and remove the North Downs one and complete, we can see this matches your location, North Down or Angmar. Cool. Let's say it was the Angmar one. Awesome. Let's complete Warg Slayer again. Oh, okay. Because of the quest, we can't know for sure. Awesome. Let's say that's in there. Let's do something a little bit more connected with Goblin Slayer. Okay, so we can see that. Oh, I'm sorry, Spider Slayer. Shire has it, Breland has it, Eredlun has it, Lonelands has it. There's a lot of connectivity there. So if we go ahead and do Spider Slayer, and let's say we are in Breland, then, okay, your location, Breland, great. Your adjacent ones are Loneland and the Shire. Let's go ahead and actually pull that back and go to the Lonelands. Lonelands is spelled differently, apparently. Is it the Lonelands? Ah, you'd have to spell Lonelands with an O to start with. There we go. Case sensitivity and spelling correctly. It all matters. All right, so if we do Spider Slayer, then we get one that matches. Awesome. If we do another Spider Slayer, it knows it was Breland because that's the only thing where we are or adjacent. Perfect. If we do it again, now you're in the Lowlands, and the rest of these are... Oh, we can see the Witch Deed is also looking at those found deeds. All right, we gotta find other uses of found deeds and make sure we're paying attention to them. Lanelands, the Southern Tolkien spelling, says Nutus. Yeah, I use a Dvorak keyboard layout instead of a QWERTY, and for me, A and O are right next to each other, the pinky and the fourth finger, and sometimes I misdo those. Okay, so found deed, we're using it here. Okay. If found deeds, deed index is completed, if not that, then end. Okay, that's the only other use of that found deeds. We can see this found deeds is coming from get deed indices, and I believe this was the only use of get deed indices. Great. This is why we test things. So what we want to do is go ahead and reload. We're in the Lowlands, and we just completed Spider Slayer, and now we can see the ones that are completed are not listed. So we have Shire, Erlun, Moria, Southern Morwood, and Southern Mirkwood and Great River. Okay. Notice, are you saying you're typing with one finger? That sounds like it would cause muscle strain. Okay, neat. So the disambiguation window is fixed, I think, in the specific problem that we were looking at, which was a Warg Slayer, which is not only a heavily conflicted quest, but also, a heavily conflicted deed name, but also has a conflicted quest. So, if we're back in the North Downs, and we go ahead and finish off Warg Slayer, and that's the deed, and then we go ahead and finish off the quest, we're going to be able to skip the automatic Angmar and say it was the quest. And I think in our code, if we go to Warg Slayer, we're saying is repeatable is false. Defeat 8 wargs for Daggerus. Alright, repeatable false, 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 false. Why do we have is repeatable equals false and yet it's not marking it? I ask you. Let's go ahead and unload for a minute and come look at the save file in question. So we're going to go ahead and open up to documents, Lord of the Rings Online, plugin data, account name, server name, all characters, and then dtracker underscore caredata underscore character name dot plugin. Great. Okay, so we can see quests, yes, we've got marked here. Oh, interesting. I think there's a design problem here. Because we have multiple deeds pointing at the same quest. And that's just not going to work. What we really want is these deed IDs are linked to this quest ID. And this quest ID, singular entry, is repeatable. Notice how we have multiple defeat 8 wargs for Daggerus going on here. So, okay, this is a bigger problem than right now. But, so let's make a note of that. Bug. Conflicting quests is not structured correctly. It should have a list of the two parts. A list of deed IDs. Well, no. It should be indexed by quest ID with a deed ID's entry of one or more deed IDs that match by name. And that might actually fix another problem, which is we've been assuming that the conflicts exist in all of the languages. If it existed in English, I've just been assuming, oh yes, it's also conflicted in French and German, which sometimes is true, but we shouldn't assume it. So instead, as a language-specific issue, we can say, okay, for each quest, here are the deed IDs that conflict with it. But then you do have to iterate through all of them. Would you... Or two tables, one by quest ID and one by deed ID that links back to quest ID. Something like that. Probably this. The deed to quest ID would be language. But could be language specific. Okay, neat. Okay, so that's not going to be a solved problem today, but it is a problem. Maybe it will be a solved problem today. It's not going to be a solved problem before I commit this other fix, which is to say, that bug is fixed. Oh, let's come look at it in source control and see what other things we've added in. So, fixed bug where... Oh, you know what's funny is this following... Oh no. This following fix might actually... If we have a lookup table of names to quest IDs, then it wouldn't be linked to a specific deed. At the time, I was thinking, oh, you know, here's the deed, here's the quest, they're tied, but what we really care about is whether they have the same name. Yeah, that's funny. The fix that we just did might actually end up being unnecessary in the face of the conflicting deeds thing. Conflicting quests. Let's
table that fix for a second by first coming in to unnecessary changes and getting rid of those. So found deeds, we're getting rid of this debug statement and this debug statement. But the rest of this is hilariously maybe not necessary. Now that I found this other problem. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to stash these 3 files. Make sure we've unloaded our plugin. We're going to do a partial stash of just these 3 files. And this would be a fix of North Downs org Slayer issue. Possible fix of that. We're just going to set that aside. This is one of the things I love about source control, especially some of our modern tools that allow for stashing and all of that work we just did. We have not lost it. It's still there. If we come look at our commit tree, we can see that, all of the changes that are there, and we can reapply them at any point. But we can just slide them to the side and think about a different problem for right now. Actually, I'm not entirely sure that I wanted to set the to-do aside. So let's show what that looks like. We're going to go ahead and apply that. We'll even delete the stash. And we're just going to go ahead and stash these 2 files. Oops. Oh, fix. North Downs Warg Slayer issue. So we're just stashing those 2, like just putting them on the shelf. And we still have this. So in fact, I'm going to go ahead and delete that deletion. And we just have this. So to do file change, we're going to go ahead and add that in. So we have a clean working directory, and we can come back in and say, what's going on with this conflicting quests? So where's conflicting quest used? That's sort of the first question is, how widespread is this change going to be? So we have the definition here, and it's only used in this file. Awesome. Makes life easier. So, given a deed ID, we can get a name. Given a deed ID, we can get the announce text. And how widespread are these functions used? Well, let's finish our analysis. Does the deed quest exist with a deed ID? Does deed have conflicting quests? How is that different? It looks like we use the one and the other. Is conflicting quests? Is delayed? Was there an announcement? Okay. And then check for delayed text. All sorts of exciting things. Where are these functions used? How widespread is this damage going to be? Deed or quest window. That feels weird because, kind of by definition, if you have the name of the deed and it's a conflicting quest, then you have the name of the quest. That's strange. Oh, but what I've done is I've gone ahead and just fully qualified the name of that quest. Welcome back, Casper. Well, Redhead says, Casper would really like some human food or to be let outside. He's disappointed in my lack of providing either. Yeah.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
So sad.
I also am not food or have no food. Yeah, I have scritches. I do have scritches. Any more? Is that too much? Sometimes he likes very vigorous scritches. Maybe not right now. Okay. What's going on? Okay, this is just used internally. I almost want to make notes about where is this thing being used. Oh, look at that. Identical logic exists. That's not great. That is a note to myself. Okay. So it looks like the big one is, does deed have conflicting quest? And we're passing in a deed ID. But we shouldn't care about the deed ID, we should just care about the name. Does the name exist? And that is a language-specific issue, to be sure. And he just says, when I was revisiting my PowerShell work, I realized my past documentation confused me more. Yeah, it's a downside. It's writing code is something we do so much more often than reading code, it can be. That it can be very easy to kind of let the reading skills slide, and if it gets to be too complicated, you're just like, oh, it's a mess. I'll just rewrite it, and that's not necessarily the best instinct. I wanted to add lines like "Beware dragons" here. Yeah, there's some code in here that's just like, don't worry, don't mess with this unless you're doing a full rewrite of like the UI. Okay, so places where we're doing this. Get conflicting quest name. And we're passing in the deed ID, which is limiting, because we could just be passing in that whole deed, which would give us the name implicitly. And we do have a deed in both places. So the first thing we could do is we could go ahead and say, let's get the deed instead. And from that deed, we would have the name. For instance, Lore of the Blades. Or the Book of Beasts, or of Leaf and Twig, all of these things. And based off the name of Leaf and Twig, that's how we should be telling if there's a conflicting quest. Which would be convenient, because ideally we would just like to do this as a textual match. We don't want to have to have previously known about this, except that we only want to have a couple of quests. So it feels like I should really be indexing based off of the name. But I could also see doing a quest ID to quest name lookup, or maybe quest name to quest ID. So, conflicting quest name to ID equals this. And so what we're looking for is, trouble in Tuckborough equals, and then an ID. We could make up our own IDs. We could use some that seem to be consistent with what LOTRO is doing, I'm just going to default to that other one. And so we're going to say it's equal to this. And I'm just borrowing from the LOTRO Companions data dump for that. So treble and tuck-bro would be that, and then this would be the lookup entry for there. This is a kind of transformation that I think is a little bit tedious, so I wouldn't say that I should do this on stream, but this is the kind of transformation I would do. Is we're going to have a name, treble and tuck-bro, and that, if it's present here, will give us an entry into the conflicting quests table. And so that would be a quest ID, indexed by quest ID, language dependent quest name to ID lookup, quest ID lookup. And when we have a deed, instead of a deed ID, we would just use the deed name to go ahead and look into the conflicting quest named ID, and that gives us the entry in the conflicting quests if it's present. And if it is present, then multiple deeds with the same name will point to the same quest. The only question is, do we have multiple quests in here with the same name, multiple legitimate quests? I think the answer is no. And this would also solve the problem of there are some peculiarities in English that I don't know extend to the other languages. For instance, a lot of the times the name of the deed is the same as the quest that you get when you go into the instance. For instance, Trouble in Tuckborough is the name of the deed. When you go into the skirmish, you get assigned a quest called Trouble in Tuckborough. Inconvenient. But Siege of Gondomar, the name of the quest is The Siege of Gondomar in English. So there is no conflict. They are different names for no apparent reason. And so you get conflicts with Storm on Methodus, Stand on Mansul, Thievery and Mischief, and so on. But then you get like Fort of Bruinen. The name of the quest is The Fort of Bruinen. Sweet. And same thing. For The Battle of the Deep Way, the quest name is just Battle of the Deep Way. So it goes the other way. So you get some inconsistencies here that actually make this a little bit easier. But mostly it's skirmishes. But Eyes of the Enemy is a an instance deed in Moria, but it's also a repeatable quest in Trollshaws. So what are you going to do? So yes, that's the transformation I'm going to do, is go ahead and add each text. And this text needs to go into a language-dependent file. But the array itself wouldn't necessarily have to, except that the announcement text we're looking for and the quest names that we want to display, like the categories, whatnot, these are all pretty language dependent. So the whole thing is language dependent. All of these arrays are going to be language dependent. And they can either be split out by file, and we only import the specific file that we care about, which I tend to do for larger things, like hundreds or thousands of lines. I don't want to load all that cruft in. Or in this, where you just have a table and you go ahead and just include them all because it's just not that large. This is probably large enough where I'm starting to think splitting it out is a good idea. Okay, so what we want to do is kind of document our thoughts so far. So I'm going to go ahead and do a split view here. Okay, so make fill out conflicting quest name to ID, table in each language, update indices in for this to be quest IDs, update each function in conflicting quests that takes a deed ID to take the deed instead, and use the name to in the conflicting quest name to ID lookup. Okay, what else do we have? Go ahead and split out conflicting quests .lua data into language-dependent versions, and remove get string calls. Awesome. There is a helper function, get strings, which you pass to a table like quest name, and a language like German, and it'll say, cool, here's the German one. Oh, that's not available. Here's the English one as a fallback. Okay. Well, as I'm writing my notes on what this will look like, I feel like we've reached a pretty good breaking point to wind down and stop trying to worry about code changes in favor of, just planning for the future and answering any last minute thoughts, comments, questions, concerns that might come into chat. So if you have any of those, feel free to get them in there, and we'll answer those before shutting down for the night. And otherwise, hopefully we can get to them next time. All right, so conflicting quests, not structured correctly. It should be blah, 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 2 tables. Okay, we have a better idea now. So, to do, fill out that table for each in each language. A version per language. Update the indices to be quest IDs. Update each function. Okay, update any remaining functions to understand the new system. Split out the data into language-dependent versions, and remove the get strings calls. Des asks for a Spanish version. I am not opposed to supporting whatever languages people want, but right now the plugin does call a specific function called turbine.engine get language, and that result is going to be one of a couple things. It's going to be French or German or once upon a time Russian, though I think nowadays that will never be the answer. We might also see English. So realistically, the client's only ever going to give us English, French, and German, so that's what we're checking for. So I think it would be really neat if Standing Stone Games had an unlimited budget and infinite time and did come out with other language translations of the game. But I would say with some certainty that that is not on their radar right now. They don't have the time or budget to do that, it seems. And they certainly have not indicated any plans to do it anytime soon. But yeah, if I could wave a magic wand and add support, I suppose Dutch language would not be high on the priority list. Though again, my magic wand, so I get Dutch first. But then yeah, absolutely, Spanish would be a really important addition to that. Sadly, it is not to be any time in the short term. So yes, user interface wise though, you could absolutely support other languages in your user interface. You can just have an option in your options to say what language do you want the plugin to be, and all of the plugin specific things, like all of these strings here, you could have Spanish translations, you could have Greek translations, you could have Italian translations, all of these. And as long as the fonts in game support your character set, it would work. But you would have to do that manually. You couldn't automatically detect based off of the client language. So if anyone ever wants to send me strings that are for a different language, for the user interface only, that are a different language than one of the supports, I'll go ahead and integrate those in somehow. But it's a bit of an uphill battle because the rest of the game is still in whatever language. But neat idea. Thanks for proposing that. Des asks,
Thank you very much. Did the Spanish language ever exist with Turbine? I think the answer is the only officially supported languages have been English, French, German, and Russian. And I believe the official support for Russian was dropped, and there may be some fan efforts to try to maintain that, but it is a big job because this is a game with a lot of text. And MMOs are kind of like that. Like, they're evolutions of Moos and Mushes back in the day, which were text-based games that you interacted with a huge world. And this just puts a nice user interface on it, very pretty scenery. But at the end of the day, it is text, 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 text. Quest is text, deeds are text. What are you doing to the enemy, and what are they doing to you? Text. And so there's a great deal to translate for anyone who makes that attempt, and I wish them luck. But yeah, Spanish, I believe, was never one of the supported languages. And of course, that's one of the reasons why it would be so great to be localized. I am not a native Dutch speaker, but I think it would improve my ability if I was spending all the time I was playing in Lord of the Rings Online, seeing Dutch words and Dutch phrases and Dutch user interface. I think that would help me learn the language. So I would absolutely run it in Dutch. And I can run it in German, and it's kind of similar. It's just not. It's not the same. And so I would very much like more language support for those people who either struggle with English, French, or German, or just want to have it in a language they're either native in or are trying to learn. And unfortunately, it is not to be right now. But it never hurts to jump onto the forums and say, hey, I too would like to have a Spanish translation, because if they see enough, hundreds or thousands of people saying it, in the medium to long term, that could turn someone's ear. Probably not. I don't want to make any promises, but ultimately, at the end of the day, Standing Stone Games is a company that is focused on its players, on the people who play the game. Especially the people who pay to play the game, but in general, the people who play the game. And so if people are clamoring out for, we want more of X, it doesn't necessarily mean that Standing Stone Games is going to do it, but they are likely to know that that is something people want, and that can impact what they want to do. Because ultimately, their goal is not to frustrate the player base, it's just to respond to the player base in a way that corresponds to their internal vision for what they want to do with the game, and hopefully make everyone a little bit happy. So it never hurts to let them know Spanish would be welcome. I think they know that that's true, but the more people who say it, the more different people who say it politely on the forums, the more information that gives to them. That being said, maintaining multiple languages, multiple official clients for a game like this is an incredibly difficult thing for a small company to do, and I'm very impressed that they do it at all. It means that every time they put out an official announcement on the forum, that gets translated into English, French, and German. It probably was written in English, so it gets translated to French and German. Every time they put out something on LOTRO.com, a newsletter or a festival guide or an announcement there, it gets translated. And so it makes it harder to be spontaneous. They can't just be like, oh, I'm just going to post something on the website that says, happy birthday Tolkien, because they got to go ahead and get that translated and localized and put that out in 3 different ways. And so it just adds this little extra bit of effort to everything they do. And if you can imagine everything they do times 3, okay, now instead of that, we're going to do times 4, right? It's a lot to ask of a small company, and I'm very impressed they do it at all. Even if it's for languages that I don't want as much as I want Dutch. Okay, what a neat question. Thanks for jumping in there and asking. So yes, plugins. Plugins can show whatever language you want. So it is very possible to just have a language selection box that overrides the client language. And if you say, oh yeah, show me Spanish, and you have Spanish strings, then everything the plugin shows could be in Spanish. So if you are a user of a plugin and you would very much like to see the user interface parts of it in Spanish, reach out to the plugin developer and say, hey, here's all the translations, would you please incorporate them? And they very well might. Maybe ask them first, just in case. But yeah,
I would add a little down here to say user interface language and allow you to override if someone wanted me to add in support for different languages. But once you get beyond the plugin or to other plugins, it changes again. Des will wait patiently and eager to arrive in the future. I think that's the best policy. I think that's a good idea. Okay, awesome. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that, and I think that was a great question and a great way to end this stream. So don't forget, on Wednesday, there's another... my goodness. The walkthrough with scenarios. What does he call them?
Oh, casual stroll.
Casual stroll. Thank you, Little Redhead. There's another casual stroll with scenario. I believe scenario is going through West Rohan. It sounds like it's very interesting. So do check that out tomorrow at some time. It's on the LOTRO Twitter and in the announcements and whatnot. I think Little Redhead's going to pull it up for me. Hey, little one.
I was trying to copy this. 2 p.m. Eastern.
Okay, here it's 2 p.m. server time, which is Eastern time in the United States. Casual stroll through West Rohan. There we go. Lead world builder scenario travels through West Rohan and the next casual stroll. It's always a great time. Scenario doesn't have technical answers to any questions like lag or what's coming in the next PvMP, but he does have a lot of information about the regions and how they were built and some design decisions that went into it, and it's always fascinating to listen in. Oh, it does ask, what's the name of that kitten? This is Casper. Casper's actually turning 7 this month, so possibly no longer kitten status. I don't know. He's still very cute, though. That's Casper. Kato is sleeping off screen. Stage right. All right. Casper just says hi. All right. Well then, that is all we're going to cover today. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining me on this exploration of LOTRO plugins. I do hope to see you here next week. And until then, keep plugging along. All right. Bye-bye now.